The 2012 draft was horrendous and is possibly the worst draft of the decade. So many duds all throughout that were never able to live up to their projected potential. Drafted 3rd overall in that 2012 draft was Galchenyuk, and he was supposed to be an elite offensive force, drawing comparisons on draft day to Anze Kopitar. Now, Galchenyuk actually looked like he was set to become a promising player for the Canadiens early on. In his rookie season, before suffering from a hand injury, he would produce 27 points, and for the next 2 seasons continued to increase his totals, proving to be a consistent goal scorer. Alex would have his breakout season in the 15-16 season, however, as he would become a 30 goal scorer, racking up 56 points in 80 games. And just at the young age of 21, it looked like the sky was the limit in terms of Galchenyuk's long-term success in the NHL. He would hit the 50-point plateau again in the 2017-18 season, but although he was producing at a solid rate, there were multiple noticeable flaws that began to show within Galchenyuk's game that worried Montreal. The following season, he would be traded to the Arizona Coyotes for Max Domi, and this was when Galchenyuk would begin to move around. After producing 41 points for the Yotes, he would be traded to Pittsburgh, and once arriving onto the scene, it was evidence that Galchenyuk struggled to fit in. He would play just 45 games with the team, recording 17 points, before being flipped to Minnesota to play out the remainder of the season. He would be let go into free agency after a mediocre performance and would sign with the rebuilding Ottawa Senators. At this point, Galchenyuk looked like his chances in the NHL were limited, and many assumed Ottawa would be a great place to get his career back on track. But after playing in just 8 games, producing 1 assist, he would be swapped to Carolina and then immediately flipped to Toronto days later. He's currently not playing for the Leafs, and as of now, his future looks very dim. But how did it get here and what caused him to fall off? Well, there's multiple assumptions that may make sense. First, Galchenyuk was labeled as a center when being drafted to Montreal, and played the center position in Sarnia with Nail Yakupov in his draft year. A comment I found under his draft video states, quote, "They drafted him as a center, yet developed him as a winger, even though he played perfectly fine at center." Another article I found during his time in Pittsburgh states, quote, "He can't quite figure out how to play the game the way his coaches want him to." Well, it's obvious that when piecing these two quotes together, Galchenyuk perhaps struggled to fit his coach's needs and playing style because he wasn't used to playing the wing. And maybe when he was told to play back at center, it began to mess up his game. Galchenyuk was never really a versatile player, and forcing a player to be something they aren't may force them to perform poorly. Sadly, Galchenyuk isn't the only player in today's video to disappoint, and isn't the only one from the 2012 draft to do so either. Griffin Reinhart was highly touted as one of the best defensemen in his draft due to his big size and tremendous upside. Many believed he was a shutdown defenseman that would strive at the NHL level, and once hearing this, the Islanders couldn't pass him up. Well, after being selected 4th overall, ironically a pick after Galchenyuk, Reinhart would fail to live up to his expectations. He would spend 2 more seasons in the WHL, actually helping his Edmonton Oil Kings win a championship, and would have his first professional debut in the 14-15 season in the AHL. He would tally 22 points before being called up to Long Island, playing in just 8 games, only recording 1 assist. Just by playing 8 games, management began to see just how bad Reinhart struggled at the NHL level. He looked flat out lost at times, and his defensive game was anything but. Reinhart was also not a very fast skater, and his positioning always seemed off, further slowing him down from any success. This would prove even more evident the following season after Reinhart would be traded at the draft to the Oilers, as once suiting up in 29 games in Edmonton, his on-ice play would continue to get worse. Even after playing in 21 more games than he did with the Islanders, he would still produce only 1 assist, eventually being called down to the AHL, where he would stay for the remainder of his pro career. Reinhart would be selected by Vegas at the 2017 expansion draft, but wouldn't even get to suit up for a single game. Instead, after 1 year with the Wolves in the AHL, he would sign in the KHL and then the DEL 1 year later. Things get worse when you look back on that Oilers trade, however, as not only did Edmonton get 29 games out of a pretty bad Griffin Reinhart, but they would trade the 16th overall pick and the 33rd overall pick to the Islanders in order to acquire him. Those 2 picks ended up becoming Matthew Barzal and Anthony Beauvillier. Drafted 3rd overall in the 2010 draft, Erik Gudbranson was another one who was projected to be a shutdown defenseman, except this was mainly due to his big frame. Gudbranson could lay a pounding on the opposition, but even Pierre Maguire mentioned when he was selected, quote,
"The one thing, Bob, that's missing, there's not a whole lot of offense."
And this was proven when Gudbranson stepped on the ice at the NHL level. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not like Gudbranson isn't capable of being an NHL caliber player, as he has in fact played in over 500 games in the league, but he isn't really the quality defender he was made up to be. Erik has only produced 76 points at the time of recording throughout his long career and has bounced around quite a lot. This is mainly because when he's on the ice, he ends up dragging the team down more than helping them. Gudbranson has actually struggled defensively throughout the years and has, in a way, become an anchor on the blue line. He would spend only 3 years in Florida before being traded to the Canucks in 2016, and although his playing time decreased, his salary definitely didn't, as despite being mediocre at best, in 2018, Benning gave him an almost unmovable 3-year $4 million deal that would eventually force him out of Vancouver and other teams as well. Since that deal was signed, he would only play one more season with the Canucks, 7 games for the Penguins, 44 games with the Ducks, and is now a member of the Ottawa Senators, being named assistant captain and tallying 3 points in 23 games. Perhaps Gudbranson was drafted in the wrong decade, as he was drafted more so for his big frame than he was anything else. And so was Dylan McIlrath, in 2010 no less. He was taken by the Rangers 7 spots after Gudbranson, and his career can pretty much be described similar to Gudbranson's. McIlrath was taken for his size as well, as he was supposed to become a gritty defender who could cause havoc on the ice. Essentially, he was taken for his massive size and aggressiveness and nothing else. In fact, the entire panel was absolutely shocked that he was selected as high as he was. Obviously, this would fail to pay off for the Rangers, but he did show some flashes of hope. However, McIlrath's decision making was horrendous, and he lacked any offensive or defensive skill. He has since bounced up and down the NHL and AHL, and actually played in 16 games with the Red Wings last season, but failed to produce a single point on the score sheet. This season, he's on the Wings affiliate team, playing in just 3 games, producing 1 whole point. Dal Colle is an interesting one, as many like to claim he's fallen victim to the Islanders' poor developmental system. Dal Colle looked extremely promising coming out of juniors, as he had produced back-to-back 90-plus point seasons in the OHL, and was looked at as one of the most offensively skilled players of the draft. This would cause the Islanders to select him 5th overall in the 2014 draft, and it took Dal Colle a while to solidify a spot in the NHL. Dal Colle would play another season in the OHL, and would produce 25 points in 30 games with the Generals, before being traded to the Frontenacs in a massive deal that would see him produce an additional 55 points in another 30 games. Even though he was producing solid offensively, there were worries about his defensive game. He would be cut early from the 2015 World Junior Championship roster because of this, and it would take a hit to his confidence a bit. He would play the remainder of the 15-16 season in the AHL, and would remain in Bridgeport for another 2 seasons. Michael would tally 41 points in the 16-17 season, then 24 points the following year, even playing in 4 NHL games, producing 0 points. At this point, many began to worry about Dal Colle, as most of the 2014 draft was already solidifying themselves in the NHL level at that point, while he was struggling to even be in the NHL. He would play in only 34 games with the Tigers the following season, and will get called up once again, this time producing 3 goals and 4 assists, and last season, in the COVID-shortened season, Dal Colle played in 53 games with the Islanders, tallying 10 points. At least now, it seems Dal Colle has finally found a home in the NHL, but he's only played in 8 games this year with the club, recording 2 helpers along the way. I wouldn't call Dal Colle a bust, but I would call him a disappointment, as not only did it take him a while to make it at the NHL level, but he's been a mere depth forward at best. Luckily, he's at least in the league, unlike somebody else in this video, who may just be the biggest letdown of the entire decade.
Face-off won by Belanger. Shot knocked down by Stoll. Oilers again, a shot save, rebound, Stoll! Yakupov! 4.7 seconds to go, and the game is tied 1-1.
Nail Yakupov is highly regarded as one of the biggest draft busts in NHL history, as the OHL star struggled massively once arriving into the NHL and definitely didn't live up to the hype. Yakupov was projected as the unanimous #1 pick in the 2012 draft, as he was a standout star for the Sarnia Sting. He would win OHL Rookie of the Year and was one of the league's top scorers in the 2 seasons leading up to the draft. Sure enough, this was enough to make the Oilers select him with the #1 pick, and believe it or not, Yakupov looked look pretty decent at first. In the 2012-13 lockout-shortened season, he would produce 31 points in 43 games and will become a consistent 20 to 30 point producer with his 4-year tenure with the Oilers. But Yakupov struggled at multiple aspects of the game, and his lack of defensive awareness eventually caught up to him, making him a liability on the ice. In 2016, when Yakupov's contract was set to expire, he would get traded to St. Louis, only scoring 3 goals and 9 points before being let go once again. He would get his final chance with the Avalanche and would produce 14 points in 58 games, but it wasn't good enough to convince Colorado to keep him around. Nail would become a free agent once again and would decide to head overseas to the KHL. He has since bounced around a handful of teams as well, and in the 2021 season, he's produced 10 points in 22 games. Many like to believe Yakupov's career may have been damaged by coach Dallas Eakins, whose over-analytical thinking and expectations for Nail essentially set him up for failure. But Yakupov wanted things a certain way, stating in one interview, quote, "I don't really like playing without the puck, skate all the time and do forecheck and hit somebody every shift. I don't think that's my game." And perhaps that mentality is what ultimately hurt his own career. Nail is statistically the lowest career point totals by a first overall pick ever with 136, and will forever go down in infamy as one of the biggest draft busts in NHL history. As we've learned in today's video, the scouts sometimes may not always be right, and this could lead to some teams biting the bait on the wrong players, as all it takes is one judgment, report, or a breakout year in juniors to cause one team to select a player that could haunt the franchise for years to come.
And there's a report making the rounds here. There's been another trade made. And there's a report making the rounds here. There's been another trade made.